right, let's see here. Yeah, we should be live. All right, so if somebody comes to you and asks you the question, how do you play this game? Whether it's Age of Wonders 4 or Magic or Slay the Spire or Pokemon or Risk or Candyland, there's a lot of context built up in that question. It's not just a question of how do the game's mechanics work, but also the context of who the person teaching is, who the person learning is, the context of, especially who the person learning is. You do have to understand that not everyone is going to approach the game from the perspective of trying to understand the mechanics first. I do think that as you start getting into more and more complicated games, especially like 4X strategy games, that I personally lean more and more towards the mechanical side whenever it comes to explaining how to play a game. Like if you're teaching somebody how to play Dungeons and Dragons, you mostly just teach them how to have fun first, and then you teach them, the mechanical side. But I inherently think that these things are really inextricable here in Age of Wonders 4. So before we talk about Eldritch Realms and everything we got to see in the Eldritch Realms dev stream, which is going to be the bulk of what we talk about today, I do want to contextualize what we are going to see in terms of the changes by first talking about the mechanics as they stand right now, the behaviors that they produce, and then whenever we talk about, what we are seeing in the Eldritch Realms, we can infer, okay, well, given that all of these things are changing, how will this change our own meta presentation in Age of Wonders 4? So when it comes to Age of Wonders 4, here we are in this multiplayer game that we have going with Zombie and Winslaya and Gracian. This one is effectively over. We're basically at the point where we're just gonna have a big fight with Zombie, and then Gracian and Winslay are gonna have a big fight, and then we're gonna have a big fight between whoever wins this Western continent and the Eastern continent. And so we're not gonna be able to talk through the exact moves from the early game, but we can still highlight the way that things progress here on the map, because I basically remember the way that this game played out. So in Age of Wonders 4. If you're aiming to win the game, and you're aiming to win the game in a way that, challenges yourself, as you get better and better at the game, you're going to start learning the intricacies of the mechanics of the game itself. So the first thing that you really, I think the first big level up that a lot of players pick up is that it's sort of not just a 4X game, it's really more of a war game, a la Advance Wars or whatever. So in a standard or a traditional 4X game like Humankind or Civilization, then a lot of your economic scaling is going to come from the buildings that you build inside your cities, right? A lot of Civilization is just how do you build your hammers, your forges first, and then just build everything else from there, because everything in Civilization 4 in my brain. Yeah, I do wish that Underground could be turned off, or better yet, Code Raccoon, that they just made it useful again, because it was really, really good when Excavation was broken. It probably would be too powerful as a 1-point trait if they'd left Excavation alone. Here, wait, one second. Let me close my doors because my air conditioning is really loud. You guys might not hear it, but I do. So yeah, here in Age of Wonders 4, the first thing you're gonna, naturally want to do if you're just coming from any other 4X is you're gonna want to develop your cities. But in Age of Wonders 4, that's actually not how you're gonna be getting the majority of your economy early on. It really is a war game, sort of like in, the Advance Wars or any of the Age of Empires or anything like that. A lot of your resources you're going to get not only from being able to exploit these areas, but from just conquering them. If we had any units down here to just go out into these fights, then we could show that off. But basically the pacing whenever it comes to fighting in Age of Wonders 4 is largely around reinforcement range. So here you can see that there is a stack of bad guys standing on this Wyvern Eyrie, burning it to the ground. We've scattered some of our units to move north to go fight Zombie, because in the case that we're just ending the game, you kind of don't need to be fighting them. But one of the core mechanics when it comes to Age of Wonders 4 is reinforcement range. There are a couple of really, really big core mechanics. One of them is that, your resources are going to come from fighting guys on the map standing on these resource nodes. But the other big thing is this reinforcement range. You can see that 1, 2, 3 hexes out from where it's standing, all of our units will be pulled into this fight. And what that means is that you have a lot of power over which units get to engage in any fight fight, and most importantly, like what sort of units are going to be stranded on their own. We can't watch the auto resolve here if we were to throw away these 3 units onto these 6. But I bet you anything that the one that's standing all by themselves would probably die because of the way that the AI auto resolves behave. So like there are a lot of interconnected mechanics when it comes to like the beginning of the game in Age of Wonders 4, but because of the way the scaling works, you are kind of pressured to simultaneously take care of your early game units, because your early game units are going to allow you to take these fights, therefore gain, resources for your cities, while also allowing you to keep moving around the board and keep developing your knowledge economy. Knowledge economy is important in Age of Wonders 4 simply so that you get the power spikes associated with getting higher tier units. In the game right now, the way that units work is that they're largely clumped into tiers. There are heroes and things like that, but by and large, most units are going to be tiers. And as you go higher and higher on the tiers, you're going to get higher and higher base stats. More importantly, though, the way that getting these extra units works is that you're going to have access to better and better EXP scaling. So you can see here on the Summer Fairy, it is a support unit. Any of the different types of units have their own tree in terms of what they pick up as they gain experience points, but the amount of experience points they need to get each medal is going to be tethered to the tier, in exchange for the fact that as you go higher and higher in tier, you get more and more experience points required for the next rank. Like here we have 35 experience points required for our gold, whereas this one is probably going to be 12 or something like that. Let's see, 11. Yeah, this is partially filled, but this is obviously out of 18 instead of out of 36. And that's just because of the way that this is paying us out, right? As we get more and more experience points on these stronger and stronger units, we'll get more and more HP. These units will become a lot more durable. And then at the lower end of things, what this also means is that in the beginning of the game, very, very normal pattern for players to do is to just have their strongest units in one stack at reinforcement range, send one unit out from that stack, sacrificial, something that you're okay if the auto resolve throws away, that will activate the fight for you, and it will preserve the movement points on the other units. That'll allow your other units to run back into friendly territory and heal in the event that they need to, or keep fighting if they get through the fight very cleanly. But this means that your early game units are really more tools for economic development and not things that you're necessarily going to lean on for late game fighting, simply because the scaling gets really bad as you go down. So let's find that Arcane Guard here. So our Arcane Guard currently is just the tier 1 unit for Mystics, and you can see that right now we're only getting 4 HP per level. This means that functionally experience points on these low tier units does basically nothing, and so the survivability of your low tier units is really only important insofar as you do have to have a critical mass of units to just keep clearing, and ideally be able to clear in multiple directions and pull in resources from different parts of the board, so that way your opponents aren't able to clear those resource nodes, right? It's sort of like a worker placement game, except with dragons and killing things, and although you can go back to the same location in worker placements, in this one it's maybe it's more exploration. Is it conceivable that this is more like a 4X board game than it is a something else, Walker? Maybe. But what we saw in the Dragon Realms, or in the Eldritch Realms DLC, looks like it's gonna upend this entire thing, because the way that you play the game, at least right now, based off of the mechanics that exist, is that you're gonna be just doing your best to concentrate experience points on your ruler, do your best to concentrate your Imperium into, cities, ideally. If you're fighting, another player, then you're gonna probably get some of their cities at some point, but you might release them as vassals or whatnot. But the ultimate goal of getting powerful means it necessitates getting those higher tier units. That might not be true anymore. So what is about to change? Let's switch over to let me activate the thing that allows display capture to move to the top. I'm going to have to also make this chat box smaller so that way it's not like in the way for people, but we're just going to put this one right over here, and we will take a brief look at the Eldritch Realms stream. I have a couple of timestamps for like important things that I think are worth checking out. The first one is, of course, our rank rework. So I'm gonna try to remember to post all these little timestamps down below, so that way you can navigate in the future. But at around 52:21, we hear Thomas and Luis here discuss the way that this new ranking system is going to work. We're not going to listen to like absolutely every part of the stream, and in fact, we're probably not going to need to listen to this part either, simply because they were going to tell you the same thing that we're going to look at right here. But you can see that the scaling on EXP on low tier units has gone completely out of control. It's not 4 HP anymore, it's 10. This is, in terms of like a percentage based thing, this is a gigantic increase in terms of HP. But more than that, this means that these units are not just getting HP anymore. Now you can see +1 defense, +1 resistance. If we pop back to the game, like just taking a look at these units, let's see these guys again. So you can see tier 1 gets +1 defense, or tier 2 gets +1 defense and +1 resistance. And then here, tier 3 is going to get +2 defense and +2 resistance. And so what they highlight here is that not only are we going to be able to see an Astral Wisp with just a ridiculous amount of HP, but also defensive scaling and damage, and of course the special metal, which is traditionally available at Legend rank, has been pushed down to Champion. So this means that like low tier units in Age of Wonders 4, which traditionally were useful for primarily just like clearing resource nodes. Sometimes you would end up bringing them into Ancient Wonders and trading them off for, especially like bronzes. You're fine trading, you know, whatever number of tier 1s you have for bronze Ancient Wonders. It's probably about to get a lot more snowball-y in ways that I don't know if Triumph was entirely sure that they wanted to do, because the Astral Wisp is, of course, like not the most egregious offender whenever it comes to like powerful tier 1 units. The most egregious offenders, of course, whenever it comes to like powerful tier 1 units are you know, things like let's take a look at our warriors here for our barbarians. You know, you throw a warrior on an elephant mount and you start with just 85 base HP. Right now, that's a pretty solid frontline durable type of unit. But if this were a legend rank under the new rules, and you wouldn't even need to be on a mammoth in order for these things to be insanely bulky, right? So let's just do the math. We get 20 extra HP for going to legend rank, so that gets us to 90 HP, and then you throw them on elephant mounts, that's another 15. That gets you to 105. Conversely, on the new scaling system here, we're going to be getting 50 extra HP on that 70 base. We'll have 120 base HP on the warriors, and then of course like Phantasm Warriors, we're going to have the same sort of issue where Phantasm Warriors are not only going to have like ridiculous amount of HP, but enormous amounts of defense and resistance as well. And then of course you still have the Phantasm Warriors just like with a 3 unit model for some reason. So what this means is that like you now more than ever probably need to ask yourself, is it important to take this resource node fight this turn? It probably is still the same. Like I do want to make sure that the might being in big brackets is coming across, because I think that I don't want to be hyperbolic whenever it comes to these sorts of changes, but this is probably as dramatic a change as we saw whenever it came to the hero rework, where the heroes became untethered from city cap, and probably the knowledge change rework whenever they changed the way that research now scales up with the number of tomes that you have. So beyond the rank rework, where, you know, low tier units are now going to become effectively higher tier units whenever it comes to the base stats that they're gaining, right? 10 extra HP, 10, 10, 1, 1, 1, 1. This also means that unless they have done the effort to bring those higher tier EXP scalings that we looked at for the Gold Golem, unless they bring those down, it's going to be really, really hard to get like high tier units to be competitive in a mid to late game. Oh, Cosmic Goat. I shrank the size of my chat thing, hoping that it would allow me to just like leave it on the board. But it does seem as though I may have cut off part of the chat. There we go. Yeah. So, the best way to get money early, send scouts on the sea. Yeah, there is actually some pretty solid money to be seen on the sea. I'm still hoping that we continue to get, like, good water coverage for Age of Wonders 4. The water rework was really promising and a great step in the right direction. But I do think it was only, like, the beginning of the steps in the right direction. Like, I want to see if we can get to like Merman or Zahugan or whatever. So whenever it comes to the other things that we're seeing here, the beyond the rank rework is the new unit and summoning requirements. The new unit and summoning requirements, I think we might have to just listen to that part. Let me see if I can find it.
Which is also not bad.
Oh, it's not. We're not gonna. We don't even have to listen to part of it because we can just see it right here. So naturally, in Age of Wonders 4, one of the things that's like really important is that you don't actually have to have a lot of infrastructure in your big cities right now in order to produce your most important units. So here, for instance, with Astral Anchorage, we only have a Town Hall 2. We picked up a Town Hall 2 so that way we could work on SPIs. SPIs generally give you a lot of flexibility whenever it comes to scaling your economy up. But a tier 2 Town Hall is going to be fine for producing Inquisitors. In fact, if we had a tier 1, which I don't think we have anymore, we could produce Inquisitors there as well. Because Inquisitors are not cultural units. They're racial units, so you're still going to be getting any of the racial transformations on them. But because they come from a tome, the Tome of Inquisition, you don't have the normal requirements of having the higher tier Town Hall unlocked in order to produce them. This is obviously changing, and Thomas and Luis discussed this right here. They didn't highlight exactly what would be different on the really high tier units. I'm hoping that this doesn't mean that you have to have a Town Hall 4 in order to produce a draftable tier 4, because that would make things like Tyrant Knights and Warbreeds pretty miserable in terms of their input costs, but you know, we'll burn that bridge whenever we get to it. But the more important thing here is because now these draftable tier 2s in tomes are, you know, they do require the setup of that Town Hall 2, you probably need to adjust your expectations on the draftable tier 2 units. They might not be worth actually going after if it turns out that you can just like do all of the work that you need to with Warriors and Phantasm Warriors. It's very difficult to say because Town Hall 2s may themselves also not be as important in this brand new world. I think a lot of it really is also contextual based off of the map that you're playing on. I do want to make that clear as well, that like ultimately the balancing act of dialing in, you know, like getting experience points on your heroes and getting knowledge and getting cities, you want to try to be maximizing all of those things while also not dying, which is going to be a big function of the map that you're playing on. Like when you're playing on more aggressive settings, like here we're playing with everybody is at war with everybody from turn 0, you just have a bigger army always under those circumstances. Same with like if you're just playing on brutal and you're just doing auto battles. So you'll probably still end up getting the Town Hall simply because of the other part of the summoning requirements here, which I think we can skip ahead to 4435. Is it 4035? It's 4035. So this one we'll actually listen to.
Which is tower.
Yeah. So you can start by summoning tier 1 units, but you need
it's pretty far down.
The wizard tower in order to summon tier 2.
Yeah, you need level 1 even.
So as he mentioned right there, and as Erligan is mentioning, in order for you to summon the higher tier units and therefore be able to supplement your military, because whenever it comes to Age of Wonders 4, if you're just naturally producing units within your cities, the units will spawn there and then they won't be close to the front line. And so one of the things that you do in order to keep your military growing in the early game is that you utilize summons by dropping in units all over the board to help you, you know, develop your military. But because of that change, which is, you know, now all of these things are tied up in the Wizard Tower, we might be seeing, again, like a large proliferation of powerful low-tier units. I don't want to overstate this because, you know, ultimately you can't win the game on a larger map with exclusively low-tier units, but in order to summon tier 1 units, the basic summons, you do not need a Wizard Tower, but anything beyond a tier 1 is going to require required a wizard tower of some level. Again, we don't really know exactly what level, but the biggest cost there, of course, is this dramatic increase in terms of production. In order for you to do a bunch of summoning, you're going to have to build a lot of stuff. But fortunately, this screenshot also shows us one other really important change. You'll notice that Wizard Tower level 1 has a boost now. This is something that I really, really hope that they revisit a lot of the other buildings, like a lot of the tome buildings especially, and give them access to boosts. Up until now, Wizard Towers have had no boosts associated with them simply because they've been very powerful, but I'm guessing probably because the pacing of the game slowed down so much by gating, summoning behind the Wizard Tower, that they wanted to make some boosting available. I think that makes sense. I think that also generally makes food, a little bit better. I do think that the 4, 8, 12 breakpoint is probably healthier than 5, 10, 15, because, we'll talk about this, I guess, maybe literally right now in reference to ways to get around the rank rework. But one thing that's pretty standard at the moment, if you want to get around being forced to use low tier units, there are still some tools available to you. So the first thing that you should be aware of is that you don't have to have the boost in order to build Town Hall 3. You just have to have, I think, 5 population in order to unlock it. And depending on how much production you have, and critically what faction you're playing as, what culture you're playing as, you might be able to just build this. Industrious, for instance, has a meaningfully cheaper Town Hall tree than everybody else. This might be something that is really overpowered for Industrious, given that, they already have a relatively good auto-resolve in the early game. But now, having 80 fewer cost on your Town Hall 3 might be the break point of 2 or 3 turns of who gets to start working on their bastions first or whatever. And because everybody else can still do this, but doesn't always have the same sort of production bonuses that, Barbarians and Industrious and High typically have, this change may or may not actually affect the cultural rankings all that much. But beyond town halls, there are a couple of other really important tools for still getting access to higher tier units in an earlier game where you can't, naturally draft them or summon them. The first one that they haven't told us specifically if they're changing or not changing is Rally of the Lieges. I expect personally that Rally of the Lieges is probably going to go untouched, so, I'm going to assume that that is the case here in this video. If it turns out that Rally gets nerfed and is also tied to your Wizard Tower level, then oops, sorry. We'll find that out together. But Rally of the Lieges right now is a very powerful tool for getting access to higher tier units. In this game, we didn't find a free city that we could be friendly with, mostly because Winslaya was too busy doing that with his own free cities and then the territories that he conquered off of Baddock. But free cities and Ancient Wonders both, fuel into this rally, giving you rally points that allow you to recruit units from either your Ancient Wonders or your free cities. Ancient Wonders can give you very easy access to higher tier units, even just tier 2 units. If you get now, I guess I wouldn't still be excited about a Stormscale Serpent, but if you can just get a Brewer or a Butcher Ogre on turn 5 and then give it 50 extra HP over the course of the game, that unit is going to perform really well as the game goes on. But more importantly, this means that if you find an early fairy, as we did, we might end up with insanely durable units off of early game Bannerlords things. And then as the game goes on, we did do this with, not this build. We got our Gold Golem today from going down to the Garth of the Golden Worship. But you can get Gold Golems off of your tier 4 free cities. You can get, really powerful tier 4s off of tier 3 free cities. So just be aware that this is a tool for keeping civilization alive. If you are afraid that your opponent is going to be taking you down with 115 HP Phantasm Warriors, then, a couple of Autumn Fairies will actually be able to hopefully perform pretty well there. An important addendum, or at least an important note, whenever it comes to the way that the scaling on the HP on the lower tier units is going to work, it's going to make damage over time effects just a lot worse outside of decaying, which is probably still very powerful because decaying prevents healing. It doesn't look like they scaled up any of the other dots, and dots are at base damage 4. So basically you should not be using those right now in the current, in what appears to be the current build of the game. You wish they made a Giants tome so we could summon or draft normal Giants. I think that would be really cool. Like, I think that in terms of what we see of their DLC for the next year, I don't know. I mean, I'm getting Eldritch Realms at the same time the rest of you are, which is why we're going to be doing just like a lot of streaming for the couple of weeks after it drops, because I'm going to have to play the game a lot to relearn it, or at least, you know, see how dramatic these changes actually are in practice. But a Giant's Tome would be really fun. Like, I think more Mythic units, if we can discover a way for Mythic units to perform in this universe where like Bastions are going to have 200 HP or whatever, then Mythics could, like, that's kind of also an important thing to note, Walker. Right now, Mythics are just like really powerful. Like, the earlier you can get them, the better. But like overall, Mythics are just incredible units because of the way that they scale. But because the scaling is being flattened out, I don't know if I can recommend them. If tier 5 Mythics required like 200 experience points in order to get anywhere useful, and everybody else only requires 120, and the input costs are a lot higher for Mythic units. Like, I hope you're starting to see how this is going to fragment the way that we've been playing, because the way we've been playing is just trying to do your best to, you know, maintain your military, maintain your knowledge growth, maintain your city growth, maintain your hero growth, and trading off lower tier units to sustain that growth. And now you might not want to be trading off those lower tier units. There's one more important, really good source of higher tier units that you can get early on if you so desire. This might be a gigantic buff to Call of Chaos, for instance. They've been like generally curating those pools for infestation clearing to be better and better and better. You can still kill like a silver infestation and get a sun priest or whatever, but that's very rare these days, and because access to those higher tier units is going to be more rare, just be aware that this might be the tool that you're going to be leaning on. There are, of course, other things here in the Empire development tree that you might be able to use. I don't know if Rite of the Astral Summons is actually going to be something that you're going to be clicking consistently, considering that, you know, the economies might be a lot smaller. If you're going to be running with a lot of extra low tier units, presumably your upkeep costs are going to be lower, but presumably your production costs are going to be higher because you're going to be having, you know, you're going to be forced to replace them more consistently. This is just like, I'm very tired because I was up talking to Winsaya until like 3 a.m, because this is like such a big stream for me, but I'm really excited. This really does look like almost a brand new world in terms of like what sort of games are going to be viable, what sort of builds are going to be powerful. I think in terms of adjusting your Bayesian priors, I expect that knowledge will still be useful, right? Like, whenever it comes to playing a new game like a 4X or whatever, I'm going to bring in my experience from other 4Xs. And in other 4Xs, whenever you have access to research, my expectation is that research is going to be very powerful, because research gives you the ability to scale everything up in real time. And typically the big input costs for research is, you know, the one, development of the research itself, so that way you can do the research, and then having the infrastructure to roll out whatever research you're doing. And this has like dramatically shifted the input cost, the opportunity cost, really, whenever it comes to developing your knowledge production, right? If you can kill your opponent on turn 25 with just like a bunch of leveled up tier 1 Phantasm Warriors or whatever, then like you don't need to do research at all. That's slight hyperbole, but I hope that it does emphasize, you know, like how big this may or may not be. So that's like the main bulk of what we want to talk about in terms of the rank rework. There are a couple of just like weird things in the screenshots that I did see that I'm not sure what they imply. Like here, for instance, for gargoyles. Let's see, where was it? Gargoyles probably has a broken EXP chain because this does seem to still be on the normal tier 2s. It might be that all of the experience points actually remain the same in terms of cost as where they were in the old patch. If that's the case, then higher tier units are bad almost. They do still have one big bonus, which is important, which is status resistance. But if we see that everyone's just like working with, presumably it won't be literally legend rank tier 1s in multiplayer. It'll probably be legend rank tier 3s. But this might make it so that everything above tier 4s is pointless. That's really like the truth of it whenever it comes to multiplayer. Whenever it comes to single player, you can do whatever you want to. So beyond the rank rework and the recruitment, we do want to talk about the new ruler. So the new ruler, there are a couple of just like important timestamps to pop around to. So 2206, the Eldritch Sovereign. So the Eldritch Sovereign, unlike the rank rework and the recruitment rework and the summoning rework, which are all going to be coming with the base patch, the Eldritch Sovereign is going to be the DLC thing, in addition to the tomes and whatnot. And the Eldritch Sovereign actually presents possibly. So it also, yes, so Cosmic Goat, it does a lot, really. So first it's gonna, and watch them get wrecked by infectious insanity. Yes, exactly, Lyria. Like, the things that were powerful might still be very powerful, but the things that were really bad might now also be really powerful. They might be even better, right? Like, we've seen infectious insanity do so much goddamn work in the skirmish mod, where Ninju is just like perpetually tormented me and Winsleya by utilizing infectious insanity and mind control effects, because in our skirmish mod we're primarily playing with lower tier units with lower status resistance, whereas like in Empire mode, like today we're going to be fighting against zombie probably on Sunday, and we're gonna have some tier 2s because we have like a requirement for us to bring some support units, and I do think that we're going to be fighting against Industrious, so I do think we have to have a spell shield. But like, we're going to have maybe 3 or 4 tier 2s in this fight, and then everybody else is going to be tier 3s. But like, if everybody here were tier 1, infectious insanity, rather than being effectively like a base 66% chance or whatever, would be a base 90. That's a lot more dangerous. And it does, yes, the Empire mode Cosmic Goat is just like how I refer to the regular game of Age of Wonders 4, the non-skirmish mode. I haven't come up with a catchier phrase than just the regular game. But I like this. It's you're building an empire rather than just doing a skirmish. It does also greatly increase not just the safety of auto combat in the early game, because all of a sudden your low tier units are going to have 90, 100 HP. It also means that realistically evolutionary summons might be a lot more consistent. Like, one of the big problems that you usually encounter with evolutionary summons is you'll get them out to like 31 out of 48 experience points, and then they just die. and then you're like, oh man, all that work that I did was for nothing. And that's not the case anymore. Important to note that they have reworked evolutionary, like the evolving trait. Now it no longer evolves at the champion rank, but rather will evolve at legend rank. But that's commensurate with the way that they've changed things. Everyone's still getting like tons and tons of extra experience points and HP and stuff along the way. It also creates like weird situations where now you might actually not want to evolve your dragons, because then you lose access to enchantments. That's sort of like an edge case, but overall, because you just get so much value off of leveling up, evolving is going to be A, easier, but B, it's probably not going to pay you off as much. So the Eldritch Sovereign, that's where we were. The Eldritch Sovereign is, on the surface, it looks like it's going to be one of these Wizard King equivalents, but because of the actual tools that the Eldritch Sovereign is going to make available to itself, this may be the thing that helps us dethrone the Wizard Kings. So if you play a lot like of pseudo-competitive Age of Wonders 4, Wizard King is like almost always the right choice if you're really being try-hardy. I like to play with champions and dragons sometimes, but I am aware that that is not correct, in air quotes correct, simply because the power of the Wizard King whenever it comes to getting access to the extra casting points and the overchannel is really undeniable on a larger game. The smaller games you can make good arguments for Dragon Lords, and I think high can make good arguments for champions, but like basically everybody should be playing a Wizard King if they're trying to play optimally. But an Eldritch Sovereign may have just thrown that entire equation into disarray. So the reason that the Wizard King is so powerful is that, A, you're going to be gaining the world map casting as you gain levels, and then B, you're going to have access to the overchannel ability. But in the Eldritch Sovereign, in their skills, they are going to get a very, very different skill tree from everybody else. So here there it is, 10503. We get to see Eldritch Influence. So here on an Eldritch Sovereign at level 3, we are able to see what might be dethroning the Wizard Kings in very short order here. We get plus 15 world map casting, plus 15 combat casting, and plus 4 Imperium available at level 3. This means that in a certain sense, you're getting like 6 levels worth of Wizard King like bonus casting points for reaching level 3 and spending 1 skill point. Now it does require you to spend that level up point, and so it's not as free as the the bonus for Wizard Kings. And so again, I want to qualify all of these statements with we have to play the game, please do not panic, but this does look very promising simply because it doesn't just stop with the world map casting and stuff on Eldritch Influence 1. There's an Eldritch Influence 2. It probably will only be 2. I don't know if it's going to go up to 3. If it goes up to 3, then I'm probably only going to be playing these guys for the near to immediate future, just like how we were only playing Crowbow. But even if it only goes up to 2, as long as you're getting these world map casting points early and the game isn't going insanely long, you're going to build up sort of like a bank of I have more world map casting points total over the course of this game versus a Wizard King in the barriers between level 3 and level 6. They might get a couple of extra casting points on level 2, but generally in Age of Wonders 4, because of your ability to break off units and engage in fights and concentrate EXP, it's pretty quick work to get from level 1 to level 3. And then depending on how quickly you can get to your signature skills and whatnot, there's a lot of deltas after that, but the first couple of levels are usually very, very free and very quick. So this means that here within Eldritch Sovereign, you can start the game even and Thomas and Luis did this themselves. We can see that they're here on turn 4 and they managed to hit this, and no shade, just we're talking the truth. They were playing to communicate the new content to the audience. They were not playing super sweatily, and they still managed to accomplish that in a very reasonable time frame. And that means that in terms of the casting points and therefore ability to do summoning, ability to do strategic layer spells like Blizzard and Lightning Torrent and enchantments and stuff, that the Eldritch Sovereign actually does have the ability to keep pace with the Wizard King. But beyond, it's not just the casting points that make it good. The signature skills also here for our guys. Let's go to 127. So one of the really interesting things in the Dragon Dawn DLC was that we got unique affinities coming out of our rulers, and those unique affinities would give us extra affinities throughout the course of the game in regards to our Empire development tree. And we're getting the same thing here on these signature skills. I'm not going to we're not going to talk through all of the different things that they do, because I do encourage you to watch this stream, but rather we're going to focus on the most important parts of it. Here, I think the most important thing when it comes to these signature skills is that these are dual affinity. Let's see if we can there it is. So Madcaster, you can see here it gets Astral and chaos. And this is not cosmetic, because you'll see here, like, down the road, they end up taking Flesh Weaver with Shadow and Nature. And when they take Shadow and Nature, they get Shadow and Nature. So this means that these signature skills affording you double affinity, if you can get them really, really early on, are equivalent to having played a Dragon Lord while also getting the casting points available, like the equivalent in terms of affinity of having played a Dragon Lord who reached level 4, right? Because they also had their starting affinity plus the affinity they pick up from their first signature skill. So you've like closed the gap with the Dragon Lord, and then if each signature skill also gives you double affinity, which we don't know at this point, but I think is reasonable to infer, then these guys might have even faster affinity growth than, you know, a combination Wizard King Dragon Lord. Very exciting. Like, really, really cool. The traditional problem that the devs have highlighted in regards to them is that they're squishy in melee, which may or may not be true, because they've also reworked Insanity, and they've reworked, like, a lot of the different status effects, and these guys have their abilities set at very long range. Very long range, big single action abilities are actually not bad necessarily for auto resolves, especially where they are taking one enemy unit and bringing them over to your side. This is actually great for autos. You can see this for yourself. The consequences of it being great for autos is that, you know, at the end your mind controlled units don't give you experience points, but I don't have the timestamp for that, but they did confirm that they have broken out mind control and dominate into different things. Yet so Mystic Culture is, I think, the next thing we can actually talk about here. Is there anything else that I want to talk about right now? There's some other like fun things that we can highlight in regards to the DLC, but I think the one spell that I want to talk about before we talk about the Mystic rework is, I think, the spell for People of Culture. So Retaliating Growths. People will see this spell and they will say to themselves, Retaliating Growths, as Thomas and Luis have mentioned here, this means that I should put this on like a polearm or something like that. Don't do that. I think the best thing to do with this is probably to put it on a Provoke Great Weapon hero. A Provoke Great Weapon hero is a very specific target, and so when it comes to auto resolves, you're not going to have that sort of control. But this spell does look like it's probably going to be a bigger bonus for the purposes of like manual combats rather than autos, because this is just like a giant buff for one unit. But the AI does use provokes. The AI actually really likes to use provokes. And what this means, of course, is that this might be a great tome for somebody like Industrious, right? Or just anyone who's going to get access to the Hero Forge and make a tier 4 great weapon with provoke. Like, there are lots of different ways to use this. So the new Mystics. The first thing that we should highlight is that the new Mystics are actually only the tip of the iceberg. There are other cultures that we will be talking about in probably a brief moment. But the Mystics did get the bulk of the work that it looks like they did. So that is probably going to be the bulk of what we talk about with the time we got remaining here. So Mystics are now broken into 3 different schools. We have Attunement, Potential, and Summoning. Attunement at around 842 is going to be the thing that's like closest to the way that Mystics currently works. They have the Starblades, which is, you know, the same thing that you should be familiar with. Does a retaliation get benefit from a charge attack weapon? I don't think they do, but because the charge attack weapons, like the great weapons, have just an incredibly high base damage number, and traditionally are held in check by the fact that getting extra retaliations on those great weapons is like really expensive in the item forge, it should be pretty easy to do outrageous amounts of damage with defensive masters giving you more bulk, and then, you know, a 90% on provokes against a bunch of legendary tier 1 and tier 2 units with almost no status resistance. Like, we will see, but I think that this does sound like a very solid option whenever it comes to utilizing the Tome of the Tentacle if you so desire. But the Attunement Starblades is different now. Rather than it exclusively dealing cosmic damage as you cast spells, now your Attunement Starblades actually scales up based off of the affinities of the spells that you're casting. I think, broadly speaking, this is not necessarily a buff for attunement. It means that there's more customizability and there's more control, but it also means that, like, if somebody hard counters you, that you are even more hard countered, right? If you were playing as Mystics and you wanted to do something fun and something different and you wanted to play around with a bunch of Chaos Affinity and play with fire damage, now, rather than being able to lean on the cosmic damage frost and lightning to offset against anyone who is immune to or resistant to fire, now you're very much all eggs all in one basket and may end up with problems. So this one does actually sound kind of like a nerf to me, but fortunately the way that Astral Echoes have been reworked, I don't think it matters if Starblades is marginally worse for attunement, because now Astral Echoes look like they're going to be crazy good. Not only are you picking up Astral Echoes in much larger quantities, because they're not just picking up, like one at a time, they're picking it up as an actual resource, an expendable thing with, a multiple count. Astral Echoes as attunement allows you to use them for echo casting. So echo casting is at 930? Yeah, there it is. So echo casting allows an attunement school mystic to use Astral Echoes to replace for combat casting, or more importantly, world map casting points. So what this means is that an attunement Eldritch Sovereign who happens to have access to just 20 base Astral Echoes can cast a blizzard in one turn with access to the spell. Right? That's a very, very, very powerful thing, simply because it allows you to actually double queue. So if you have enough casting points that you can cast, like your first stack of Lightning Torrent or whatever. Yeah, let's pretend like it's Lightning Torrent, because we're playing Mystics and Mystics are Astral, and people like that, Walker. People like all those colors being the same. But Tome of Evocation, right? If you're playing Mystic and you're playing with Tome of Evocation, you're playing with Lightning Torrent. If you queue up the first instance of Lightning Torrent using just your regular world map casting points, and then you have it completed, and you still have your full bank of 60, and you have 20 Astral Echoes, then here with an attunement Mystic, you can not only blast, like a very powerful stack here, or, more importantly, probably would be blasting like a Dragon's Lair. You could blast it once with the one that you carry over from the last turn, and then use those Astral Echoes to finish up the second one and blast it again. We will see. I would not be surprised to see that Tome of Evocation and or Tome of Cryomancy just got even stronger, simply by nature of the fact that these builds should be able to do double strategic layer spells on enemy stacks on like turn 8. Right? If you can, and especially in regards to Evocation, because it's -3 lightning resistance, the second Lightning Torrent is going to hit a lot harder than the first. So like this, I think there is a good space there for utilizing echo casting. It does of course require them to give up their late game bonus. The way that Mystics works right now is that as you collect your Astral Echoes, you can build like a really big, very expensive All Seers thing in your capital that gives you a scaling knowledge and mana bonus. But honestly, it's so late that it doesn't matter that much. It doesn't really make a big difference to Mystics either way. And the resource itself is pretty boring right now. And so I think that like this looks like it'll be pretty powerful, simply because casting points are one of those really, really powerful things early on. But moreover, it looks like it's going to be more fun. Like, it really does look like it's going to be more fun. Potential is something that we'll have to see in like actually in practice, because it looks to me like this is probably the worst of the three. Dissonance is like a damage, it's not really a damage over time, it's a delayed damage effect where they just end up with the damage coming out of casting overcharged spells. But a really important thing whenever it comes to potential is the way that these overcharged spells are almost certainly going to work. So if we're going to be discussing potential, let's look at what we're seeing here under the hood. So whenever you cast these overcharged spells, that's going to be the thing that's like triggers everything else in regards to, making potential work and casting the same strategic spell or combat spell over and over again for arcane inspiration. But I do think a big chunk of their value is going to be coming out of these overcharged spells. This means that you got to make sure that you have a lot of mana available. The more mana that you have available on the Empire mode, whenever it comes to, or the strategic layer, the more mana that you have and the more mana income that you have, the more likely it is that your auto-resolve AI is going to just use your mana when you click, turn spells on. Like if we were to take this fight here, we would lose these units, but with the spells on, it may or may not actually even desire to cast spells into that because it would consider it sort of a lost cause. But what this means is that you actually can't just rely on this thing to be on in order for casting to occur. This means that any sort of strategy that relies on casting for auto-resolves is gonna probably be a little bit weaker, but there are some ways to make this better. So the first thing, of course, is that Overcharge spell does give you access to a pseudo overchannel. Combat enchantments allow another spell to be cast that turn. Fortunately for the game, there aren't like a lot of those spells, so you don't have to worry about that as much. But let's see, combat spells, combat enchantments. I think they're like literally 5. Yeah, they're literally 5. And yes, there's always ways to replenish Astral Echoes. They showed off in the stream that there was a way to spend like 300 casting points to get a bunch of extra Astral Echoes, which you're probably not going to be doing that early game, but it might be worth doing to bank up a lot of Astral Echoes so you can like double or triple spell. That can be really strong. Again, just imagine instead of the second lightning torrent, the third. That would be pretty busted. But because this here on Overcharge says combat enchantments allow another spell to be cast that turn, I'm gonna guess that means that, and of course Overcharged, as it highlights here, the first time that you cast each of these spells in combat, it's gonna get this effect. Hopefully the AI pays attention to that and does try to use these overcharged abilities. This is why I'm most bearish on potential right now, is that it really depends a lot on how the AI uses this stuff. But getting access to a pseudo overchannel on some really powerful, albeit high tier spells, is promising with an asterisk, right? Like if the game is over by tier 3 tomes, then the fact that that you get potential really strong on tier 4 and tier 5 tomes just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So this may or may not be the important part of this. It just really depends on the pacing here. I think the more important thing when it comes to the overcharge spell is double tagging. So we didn't talk about this exactly whenever we were talking about the attunement. But the Starblades for attunement, I'm gonna guess that here on these spells, that if you have a dual affinity spell, that it gives you like 2 stacks of attunement Starblades, one of each type. That may or may not be true, but almost certainly whenever it comes to the potential that the double tagged spells are going to get both of these effects because of the way that they work right now in regards to things like the city boosting structures. What are they called? The lenses. I think they're called lenses these days. They've reworked the special magical late game things so many times that I don't even know what they're called anymore. But there are some buildings that you can build that give you special bonuses on your spells of different types of like different affinities and combat spells. And that's going to be, I think, the same here, where any of these things that are double tagged, so let's see, there are a lot of them that are damage debuff spell. I'm willing to bet that anything that says damage debuff, for instance, is going to both get the 25% extra damage as well as the +2 sundered resistance. So what this means in the stream, they tried to highlight use like a really broad plethora of spells, and that is how you would get the most value out of that in like a manual fight where you have control over everything. But in auto resolves or in multiplayer, I think realistically you're probably gonna more want to just lean on having good like high quality tomes that give you access to double tags. Like Condemnation is not an exciting spell right now. Sometimes you just cast it because you have to, but if this came with extra damage and extra minus resistance, it might be a lot stronger. The big X factor whenever it comes to the potential is not just the ability to use those like two different types of overcharged effects at the same time on the same spell, but also this arcane inspiration. But because we have no idea what the input requirements here are, like how many times do you actually have to cast the world map spell for you to get like perfect value and maximum inspiration, I don't know. And the auto AI needs to be improved a lot. Yeah, the auto AI, like we talk a lot about that on the channel right now, mostly because there are like a couple of big problems with the auto AI. I think broadly speaking, the auto AI has actually gotten a lot better since like the last 9 to 12 months, but there are still some big problems. Like there are entire classifications of units and entire cultures that are, I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but they really are unplayable on the highest difficulty levels or in competitive multiplayer, simply because their auto resolves just don't work. Like the AI does not understand how to use steadfast effects really well. It doesn't use like spells and summoning typically particularly well. But we will see. Like they have gone through and overhauled the AI already once, and they might do it again. And that, of course, brings us to the conversation about probably the one that everyone is going to be drawn to immediately. To be clear, I do think that summoning might be the strongest mystic. I do think that the casting points option for attunement, if you can make enough mana points available early on, may allow attunement to like hold on as the air quotes strongest mystic, because this was sort of like the only option for mystics before. But summoning is really good and does offer some real choice. So instead of getting the attunement Starblades, which will make your units a lot more damaging and therefore able to make for a faster paced combat, the attunement spell here for summoning is when a friendly spell is cast, all of your magic origin units get strengthened 1 and healed for 10 temporary hit points. This is where the math starts to get to weird for summoning. So between the combination of Attunement Astral Resonance, requiring you to have extra magic origin units in your units or in your armies, and the Astral Connection ability here, let's just like skip ahead to, oh no, show us the Astral Connection, bro. There it is. Astral Connection. Friendly magic origin units are gaining +5 morale for every friendly unit with that property, and this is going to be on your cultural units, which is inherently your non-magical units. This means that summoning is going to want to have some sort of balancing act between creating some non-magical units and then probably mostly magic origin units to make best value of the attunement. If you were just looking at ways to maximize Astral Connection, of course, then like mathematically the best way to maximize this is to have half and half, because that would give you the most total morale because of the way like multiplying products together with one of them going up and one of them going down. But that says that like every point of morale is the same, and that's not really true. Like if you have 30 morale, that's good enough. If you do not need 150, and because of course you're getting that Astral Echoes, Astral Resonance healing that gives you a lot more sustain in terms of in combat, even for auto resolves, because this isn't targetable. Right? This is just, it happens on a global scale. They just heal, and so that means that your AI doesn't actually have to be that good in order to use this. It doesn't even have to be proactive about using the extra damage the way that it does on the Starblades effects. This one you just cast, and as long as your units have taken some damage, which inevitably they do in auto resolves, it's the way the game works, that attunement will actually keep you guys pretty well topped off. So the other really nice thing on summoning, which of course like I think people, they didn't, how did they not show that here? Whatever, we can talk this through. the Astral Echoes being used for Echo Infusion. So here in Age of Wonders 4, if you're playing with Summoning, you still see the Astral Echoes. If you're playing with Potential, you don't. Potential does not use Echoes at all. They are gone from the game for Mystic. Summoning can use their Astral Echoes at a 3-to-1 cost per experience point to level up their own Magic Origin units. You have to buy the remainder of the level all in one go, but if they are at 6 out of 18 experience points required for the next rank up, then you only have to pay for the remaining 12. But what this means is that Summoning actually has access to another tool for fighting back against this rank and rework change that we've been talking about. Because they can do the evolution, right? If Summoning, and this is a big if, because we don't know how this is going to work in regards to the Wizard Tower change on Summoning, but if Summoning can take Tome of Beasts, and Summoning can still hit those tier 2 summons without a Wizard Tower 1, which remains to be seen, but if they can, then Summoning has access to probably the most consistent outside of, like, actually, Rally is also kind of luck-based because you have to find a high-tier free city. So, yes, consistent access to those tier 3 and tier 4 units via evolution. And, of course, because once you've done the evolution, right, like, your experience points sort of reset, and then you can take part in that natural, insanely powerful growth. Yes, so Skeletons and other Undead Magic Origin units should also get this bonus. Anything that comes from like a spell is supposed to get the Magic Origin tag. The issues with Reapers seemed to be a bug rather than a feature, and so Reavers, because they are coming from a spells, they're just supposed to be counting as Magic Origin, and they're supposed to be getting the Cosmic Overdrive, and that's also true here with Skeletons. And again, Skeletons, that's another one of those things that like may have just moved from being something that I despise using and tell people to never look at, but now Skeletons, if they can get double their HP by just not dying, that's pretty good. How do they not have the Skeletons here in the database? Let me see here. It's probably because you can't actually recruit them directly from the tome. You have to summon them, but like, or you have to get them after battle. But like right now, the Skeletons are just hilariously fragile, and because they get basically nothing from gaining experience points, you just never make them. Unless you're doing role playing, right? Like if you want to have fun with Skeletons, then by all means. But that's sort of because these guys cap out at 70 HP. If these guys capped out at 100 HP, they'd be a lot better. If they capped out at 100 HP and 4 defense and 3 resistance, they'd be even better. And then you also take on to the fact that all of these guys are going to be undead, and now we do have access to, the Tome of Souls and its ability to do the soul, what was it, Soul Overflow. 20 maximum HP is one of these things that scales better the more defensive tools that your army has, the more defense and resistance. If all of your units, if all of your Corrupt Souls have 2 more defense and resistance, this spell just got a lot better. Like a lot better. So, beyond the Mystic rework, there were a couple of other really big cultural changes. Those are actually... The Mystic rework was the biggest one. The other ones were more like tertiary changes that may or may not make a big difference in terms of the meta viability of these things, but is interesting nonetheless. So Reavers were the first one that got reworked. The big change on Reavers is that now focused aggression is just a little more cohesive. It now applies on melee attacks. There it is. Focused aggression. So now focused aggression is only ranged or magic attacks get the extra damage off of the marked stack, which is, those things. So Erligan, it's not just Skeletons and Corrupt Souls, it's anything off of the summons. So like anything that says summon blah 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 is also gonna get the magic origin tag. But yeah, like a lot of the necromancy things are gonna get magic origin. Summoning the tome also might be a lot better, right? If Eldritch Sovereigns do emerge as being a serious problem in the game, the Tome of Summoning stock is about to go up a lot. It's already, I think it's think it's appropriately ranked as a B tier. I think it's good against very particular builds, but those particular builds are pretty rare right now. If those builds stop being so rare and start being something that you see consistently, because people just want those casting points and the power of the Eldritch Sovereign signature skills, and they also have access to like really powerful relics and stuff. I'm gonna run Athletics on my first Eldritch Sovereign probably, because 40 movement points is a lot more than 32, but like they just look really good across the board. But Reavers, they've been reworked. The first thing that's been reworked is this marked ability, meaning that now your melee units and your mercs can support everybody else. But this also has like two other things going on here. First, Reavers always sort of benefited from having a really high quality low tier unit in the form of the Mercenary. The Mercenary wasn't ever like useful because it was a high quality low tier unit on an army that had some serious problems with auto resolve early. But that might not be the case anymore, right? Like, Mercenaries are effectively tier 1.5 units in terms of their stats and in terms of their combat efficacy in both autos and manuals. These are really good units. It's just that they don't scale particularly well, and that's different now, and we will see what that means for Reavers. They've also reworked Mage Locks, so now Mage Locks have, instead of the 3 AP shot, where basically they just stand around doing nothing most combat, both in manual as well as auto resolve, now Reavers, their shot is only 1 action point, but they have a very low accuracy on their shot, and in order for them to regularly be able to attack, like under normal circumstances, they have to use it's like a full action leave 1, sort of like phasing is right now, to set up. And when they do that setup, they get a really big increase in their accuracy. But what this means for Mage Locks, in regards to both auto resolves and manuals, is that if you can supplement their accuracy to a meaningful degree, which you can do with Marked 5, but you're probably better off doing with True Strike off of a Spring Fairy. But if you can modify the accuracy on your Mage Locks just went from being like basically dead experience points to being potentially incredibly dangerous. I'm not looking forward to fighting against somebody with a Spring Fairy and three Reavers and 3 Mage Locks in any sort of skirmish mod. That does sound really terrifying, honestly. Beyond the Reavers, we did get one more relatively meaningful change. I think this one, so like Reavers, although this addresses like some of the big issues with Reavers, we will just have to see how the AI performs under the hood. Oh, I also did hear that the Dragoon shot went down to every single turn ability, which if true is also really nice. But like the bigger problem with Reavers is simply that like the AI for ranged attacks is not particularly smart and does not support itself particularly well, and that's not a problem with Reavers, that's a problem with ranged units, but it is a problem that is observed more by Reavers simply because of their use of ranged units. Yeah, Spring Fairy Mage Lock, it's the way to go, probably, Code Raccoon. Like, Spring Fairy True Strike has always been the best tool for ranged units. There are other things that are good, but that's the best one. Auto hits are the best, or just Stormbringers, I guess, because they do auto hits all on their own. But if you're going to use actual ranged units like Mage Locks, then Spring Fairy is recommended. But Dark. Where... Did I just skip past the entire thing? Here it is, Walker. You were just like looking at the timestamp instead of the things that were on the screen. Dark is now potentially actually useful on the Cull the Weak side. So Cull the Weak had some big problems in the earlier builds. The first and biggest problem with Cull the Weak originally is that there just weren't a lot of sources of weakened in the game. This is fixed here, right now. Cull the Weak. Base physical, ranged, and magic attacks have a base 90% of inflicting weakened, and they are increased for non-repeating attacks. So what this means is that, sort of like how with the Reavers, your melee units supported your ranged units doing damage by adding marked and therefore increasing their accuracy, and because accuracy is the biggest problem when it comes to auto-resolves, I do think that's pretty promising for Reavers. Dark has kind of done the opposite of that, and because I think that melee is like generically a better thing to try to be supporting that this does look a lot more promising than what we saw out of Reavers with our current understanding of AI. This means that your Glade Runners or your Evokers or whoever are going to be able to apply Weakened and give you a lot of options whenever it comes to what sort of tools you actually bring as Dark. You don't have to exclusively bring things that say Weakened on them. As long as you, and of course, if you have a non-repeating attack, like a crossbow or something like that, then this goes from not a 90%, which checks against status resistance, to an automatic success, with the way that effects are repeating effects are increased for non-repeating. When you have a 90% and it gets increased, it doesn't go to 100, it goes to automatic. And this means that Dark actually has a lot of tools now, input options for auto-resolve, and of course this is also 10 temporary HP right now whenever you deal the damage from Cold Weak, rather than regeneration stacks. Regeneration stacks were like better over the course of a really, really long fight, but that's not the kind of fight that happens in most Age of Wonders battles, but definitely not with Dark and their use of hyper offensive tools like Dark Warriors and whatnot. Oh, and there are a couple other like cute things that I think are worth mentioning, like here the Umbral Disciples. We didn't talk a lot about the Actually, we didn't talk anything about the new Umbral Layer Walker. You should probably talk a little bit about the Umbral Layer. Let's just do a couple of minutes about the Umbral Layer. We're not gonna do the entire dev stream for this, but the Umbral Layer is another thing that may or may not be so impactful simply because it is something that is a map setting. So I didn't want to say, oh, this is the thing that's going to change the world. It's going to be the ranking and the recruitment thing. If there's going to be anything in this patch that's going to be enormous, that's the one. But being able to go into the Shadow Realm here is pretty cool, simply because this is a brand new place with an infinite amount of resources in it. If I can just find the timestamp. There it is. So here you can see that they have managed to get their way into the Shadow Realm by going through this little tentacle portal. And here under the ground in this tentacle portal, you're not only going to find magic resources and whatnot, but you'll also find the malady. This is something that you can get around if you have access to the new society trait, Umbral Disciples, which you could see at 1820 if you want to pop back to that. But that'll allow you to get around the umbral damage that you naturally suffer from traversing this umbral plane. But in exchange for doing that, right, in exchange for taking on the risk of going into this place where you're just naturally going to be taking damage over time, the amount of resources that are available on this layer are through the roof. A lot of the nodes here, rather than being plus 10 of whatever, they're like plus 30. So you'll find, gold nodes with 30. I don't know if it's this one or if there's a different one, but they do highlight in the dev diary, which I did link down below, that they have these sanctuary outposts which naturally exploit 10-10-10 on gold, mana, and knowledge. There's also this monolith here with 30 knowledge that you get off of this, and crucially here, Walker, you gotta stop popping back to the game, Walker. You gotta finish this video. And crucially, here, these Umbral Demons also give us a really interesting new direction for us to talk about damage types, because they're weak to fire. These Umbral Demons that exist in this universe are weak to fire. They have extra physical defense. They're also weak to spirit damage, and that's not particularly exciting because everybody who's weak to spirit damage is weak to spirit damage. So Leopard says, have I taken a peek at the Steam page for the DLC to see if there was any useful info in the previous screenshots? Yeah, there are some interesting things in the previous screenshots. There's some cool things, like the Tome of the Cleansing Flame is in there, for instance, but we're probably not going to cover absolutely everything that has been released so far, just so that Winslaya can talk about some stuff too. But I did want to talk about the Umbral Demons just really quickly, and the Umbral Plane, because again, this is going to be a different stress, right? If you are being encouraged to have lower tier units that you keep alive longer by being more conservative with which ones you bring into each fight, being more judicial about sending some back to heal. You may or may not have the tools to fight these guys very early, but if you do, the rewards should be outrageous. This might be something where in multiplayer we decide that it's just too powerful, because this is just so many resources. Like in the game, and this one we're intentionally switching back to the game. In the game, like, you're going to be getting a lot of resources from clearing ancient wonders and stuff, and then, you know, infestations and the like. If we had time to go down to that cool island, we would go there, but we gotta fight zombie. But now you apparently can just get all of those by exploring them. They're effectively mini dungeons, and that is really promising, because we like playing with regenerating infestations most of the time. It's, I think, mostly fun. Important to note also on that front is that neutral stacks gain experience points over time, and it sounds like this amount of experience points has been toned down dramatically in the new patch, which makes sense. Otherwise, it would become impossible to kill some of these stacks. Like, again, here, just imagine that these guys had 18 extra hit points. These guys would be 90 HP zealots with an extra defense and an extra resistance. These effectively would have the same stats as Inquisitors fresh off the boat if they were on the normal scaling schedule that we've seen so far. Oh, and one last final little note that I think is worth at least bringing up, which is that they did rework Tome of the Rock. Tome of the Rock did manage to get obsidian weapons finally, which means that now there is a way for you to utilize bleeding as an option. I still wouldn't lean into this, simply because damage over time effects are a lot worse if you're playing against units that have 120 HP than if they have 80, because of the speed at which they scale up. And then, of course, they did also rework Rock Blast. Rock Blast is now effectively like a shock attack where it breaks defense mode. So that's like all of the important stuff that I wanted to highlight from the stream today, or the stream yesterday. I think out of all of them, as we've mentioned, the rank rework, we'll have to see. We really will just have to see that. Like, I think the right way to take it is that you adjust your Bayesian priors meaningfully towards rush strategies and meaningfully away from knowledge strategies, simply because the input costs now for utilizing high knowledge are a lot higher, and the rewards for utilizing, you know, good draft and maintenance of your units, the rewards are a lot better there too. So we will see what the game looks like. I'm going to be streaming a lot once the patch drops. Probably more than is reasonable or recommendable, but I promise you that, like, I'm going to be playing the game all the time anyway, so, like, you might as well drop by and watch me lose my mind between now and release, because I honestly don't think that any of the guides that we have done I can put a silver stamp of approval on, because the game might be different. It honestly might be different. So you can go back and watch the old. Yeah, barbarians just keep winning. Yes, code. Anyone who has good auto resolves early may have just gotten an enormous buff on this patch, which may have taken barbarians from being like. I understand that Morgie and Endag have made it pretty clear that they are the best faction, but they have a really high barrier to entry whenever it comes to actually utilizing them. This may change that entirely. Barbarians might just be insanely easy to use now, and might just be the best faction by an enormous and alarming margin. We will find out. Yeah, it's very fitting with it being an Eldritch themed DLC. But what this means is that, like, for the next 3 weeks or like 2.5 weeks, I don't think that there's any value for me making guides for you guys. I apologize for not making the high guide earlier, because I definitely had time to do that. But, like, I actually think that there is a non-zero chance that we're going to have to go back and redo every single tier list. I think there's a non-zero chance we're going to have to redo, like, every single guide that we've already done, because it might be that the balancing act of what is important and how you play the game. is different on the new patch. So that means that I'm probably going to be playing Songs of Silence for like at least some amount of time between now and June 18th. So if you are interested in a different kind of 4X that involves auto battling and multiplayer the way that we do here, then check that out. If there are dev diaries that are worth addressing, like this one here, or that one there, then we will, read through it with the same sort of effort that we do here, where we stay up until 3 in the morning and then wake up at 10:30. Walker, you could have just done this at 11:30. You could have slept more. But I'm really excited. I hope that comes across. This is crazy, and I think that it's great that they did all of this work for the game, and I really hope that we keep seeing more progress on Age of Wonders 4. Does anybody else have any questions or anything from like the stream that they wanted to highlight that they actually have the timestamp for? Because I don't have timestamps for like literally everything. No 4X mech theme games. I don't know, Code Raccoon. Like I like mech themed games. I loved HBS Battletech. I used to love the multiplayer there. I played in Prussian Havoc's tournaments and a couple of the like Inaro Sunfire things and stuff, and it was just a great game. But I don't know if it lends itself to 4X. Like you could probably do that. But yeah, why are there no good 4X mech themed games? All right. I guess for now that's Walker. And I will, we'll keep still doing all our multiplayer streams, and we are going to be doing just like an outrageous amount of single player streams whenever the Eldritch Realms drops. How do you get? Oh yes, that's a great question. So you get resources from the Eldritch Realms when you can't build cities by conquering and creating these sanctuary outposts. So the sanctuary outposts, it seems like you can build on specific spots in the Abyss, but you can also get them from destroying Umbral Gates, which means that, like you wanted to have the strength to actually be able to fight infestations and whatnot in the Umbral Abyss, and the Umbral Dwellings. If you destroy an Umbral Dwelling, you get a Sanctuary Outpost as well, I'm pretty sure. And these places seem to give you the ability to heal there instead of taking damage. I have thought about revisiting some of the older AOW games. I actually have thought about revisiting Planetfall a lot. I have not played nearly as many hours of Planetfall as I have of Age of Wonders 4. Let's see, actually, I think, yeah, Age of Wonders 4, you have played for 1,231 hours, and I guarantee you Planetfall is like 86 or something like that. And it wasn't that I didn't enjoy Planetfall, it's just like I got it at a very weird time. I'm at 113 on Planetfall, so I'm a literal order of magnitude more time in Age of Wonders 4. And then my Shadow Magic game, I think I have on CD at my parents' house. Like I could get it on Google. I could get it on GOG. That might be something fun to do in the future, Leopard. Like see how the different Age of Wonders games have like evolved over time. But Age of Wonders 4 itself is evolving in real time right now, and I don't want to distract from that as the headline. Because this really does look some pretty big stuff. I think the new leader type may be the best. We will have to see how the pacing works in regards to like their ability to clear the map, and their ability to actually like hit level 3 and level 4 for early game spikes, and if they get the double affinity at level 8 on their signature skill and level 12 on the signature skill. But like, based off of first impressions, I think the Eldritch Sovereign might be the strongest ruler type we've seen, but not necessarily in an oppressive way, because it does have that glaring weakness to just somebody takes Tome of Summoning and mind controls your ruler on turn 1. So that would be pretty embarrassing. So someone's gonna do that in one of our multiplayer games. Not us this time, but we do have our Arcane Bond for all of Zombie's stupid Storm Elemental. He's got like 14 Storm Elementals over here. We're just gonna mind control of them and send them at Zombie's face. But yeah, I think the changes that we are seeing in a discrete and observable way, you should expect lower tier units to just get way better. So much so that it might invalidate knowledge strategies and like going big in the mid to late game. That might be overselling it. We will have to see. But Barbarian Warriors on elephant mounts killing everybody on turn 15, or Phantasm Warriors with athletics killing everybody on turn 15 does kind of look like the option. Oh yeah, that's actually really important because Code Raccoon says, or primal summons, they're tier 2 primal animal right now against the new ruler. It's not just that. Primal summons, so primals might be unplayable on the new patch. One of the things that has held primals together in like skirmishes and whatnot is that the tier 2 units, of course, they're going to have a pretty easy time bullying lower tier units and finding ways to apply themselves. But the summons do not naturally get extra experience points. They don't have extra ranks. Even the overcharged summon on potential in Mystics gives you strengthen stacks on your summons rather than ranks. And you're going to be going in with like, recruit rank summons with 70 or 80 HP against 115 HP Phantasm Warriors. Primals are going to be really hard to get good value out of in a universe where their summons are worse than generic tier 1 units on the map. They're not great right now. Part of that is just auto resolve problems. But the underpinning mechanics of the game are about to become a lot more hostile to primals, to the point where I think people are probably going to get upset on Reddit. I'm prepared for that. I hope that Triumph is too. I don't think that this was the wrong direction for them to go, by the way. I think that having more durable lower tier units presents more opportunities for units to accidentally support each other, which is why I got into an argument with Cody 9 months ago over the Evolved mod. But I think that broadly making more lower tier units burlier and more durable means that you're going to have better auto resolves and more consistent auto resolves across the board for everybody. And that's good. That's good. That means that barbarians are not going to necessarily be oppressive just because everyone's more bulky. But this looks like a dramatic overcorrection from my standpoint. It looks like it'll be a fun dramatic overcorrection because I love Phantasm Warriors, but it does look pretty silly. We will have to find out how it plays in practice. All right, for now, that is Walker, and that's We Play Games. All right, take care. Oh, wait. Walker, there's the end stream.